Welcome to the first episode of the Journey podcast. I'm here with our very first guest, our executive director, Pat Petkau. Pat, thanks for doing this. Thanks for being here this afternoon.
Jake, it's great to be here. Thank you for organizing this.
First of all, I understand that congratulations are in order. You're a grandpa again.
Yes. So excited. Isabel Marie was born this week.
I saw the pictures.
Yeah.
How many grandkids now?
Well, not counting Mia, who is stillborn to Daniel and Hannah, we have two boys.
Okay.
Two other boys now. So Jack is Daniel and Hannah's first boy. He's almost a year and a half now. And then Caleb is Brandon and Sarah's boy, and he's going to be 2 next month. And so 3 on earth now, 1 in heaven. And then Brandon and Sarah will there'll be another grandchild from them in August.
Okay.
So,
well, you and Karen have been here for a long time, and I'm sure a lot of people know your story, but there are probably some that don't. So tell us a little bit about, like, how did you come to be involved at camp in the first place? And what your journey here has been.
This is interesting timing for this because it's almost exactly 40 years since I first came to camp. I came in 1984, in June of 1984, as a student in the LTD program. And Karen came a couple years later when I was program director, and she was a counselor, and that's when we met. And so it's been, for me, it's almost exactly 40 years since I first started here.
Yeah.
So
and you've had what positions at camp? Because now you're the executive director. What have you done in your time here?
Yeah, I was a student as an LTD in the LTD program. Dick Angelo asked me if I would stay on as program director. So I did that for a season, which is when I met Karen. And then while I was doing that, then Dick asked me to consider staying on as camp director, and that grew to executive director like 20 years ago or something like that. Yeah.
So you're still the executive director.
Correct.
But your role has changed a little bit. Talk a little bit about what it looks like now versus what it looked like just a couple years ago.
Yeah, it has. So my role now has changed with the addition of a camp director for this site, because that's what I did for a lot of years, is just operational director at Forest Springs. When God brought John Clausen to be the camp director for this site, my role expanded to be executive director for the whole ministry, overseeing now 4 sites, which is now included Wood Lake and Cedar Bay. Mm-hmm. And so some ways similar title, but the responsibilities have definitely expanded from then. Yeah.
So with that sort of transition, that growth that we've experienced, you've seen this place when it was, when you first came in the 80s, you saw what it was back then.
Right.
We added on Oak Forest a number of years ago, and then it's continued to expand. Maybe talk a little bit about your experience as kind of leading that transition.
Yeah, that has been very much of a huge learning curve for all of us, because we had never sought to intentionally grow. We didn't have a plan to say we want to have 4 different sites. We just wanted to be faithful with whatever God put in front of us. And so as He opened these doors for other sites like Cedar Bay and Wood Lake and even Oak Forest, they were brought to us. And so we just, all along the way, just wanted to be faithful with what God put in front of us. Mm-hmm. I often think of the manna experience for the Israelites, with Moses, and the idea that, at first thinking, man, I don't know how we can do this, but when Dick first asked me to become program director, I remember thinking, oh man, that's way too much. I can't do that. But God was always so faithful to provide what we needed for each step of the way. And so for me to say, okay, program director, and then camp director, and then executive director, as God kept expanding those borders, He kept providing, what we needed along the way. And so that's been an exciting part of the journey, even though we've never sought it, but it's like God has provided. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So as you've kind of overseen these changes, obviously there's things that are amazing benefits, and then there's also some things that are challenging. So thinking back on kind of what you've learned as you've gone through this, what are some of the things that you feel have been the biggest blessings from that growth?
I think the biggest blessings have been opportunities for us to see God answer prayer, for Him to provide people like staff that have wanted to join the team, for us to see people, donors that said, I want to be part of this and seeing what God is doing. I often think of the passage where Jesus talks about the fields are white unto harvest, and what are we doing for the kingdom? Because time is short, and as we look around at our world, we see, man, how much time is there before Jesus returns? And so I look at that and say, man, what are we doing for the kingdom right now? And so for me, that's a great opportunity for us to say, that's exciting. That's rewarding to see. We have an opportunity to reach more people, more kids now at Wood Lake, and families, as part of the ministry. And so that to me is very rewarding to see people, both staff and campers and donors, get excited about that mission, that purpose.
What about challenges? What have been some of the biggest challenges you feel like we've faced?
I think with that growth, there's been challenges with how do we manage that well without overwhelming our staff? There's been challenges, for example, even within the marketing team. How do we do this well? I feel like the team is excited about these opportunities. I'm looking at you and Jason in the marketing team, or Eric in our construction team, and I think that our staff are excited about that, and they're excited about the opportunities. But I think it's caused all of us as a whole to really be stretched, and that's been a challenging. How do we do this well? That's more internal. But then I also look at the external challenges, and I look at our world around us, and I think, man, I look at how fast our culture is changing, and how what our commitment to say we want to be committed to the absolute truth of the Word of God, and how do we do that in a world that does not necessarily respond well to absolute truth, and so how do we be like Jesus when it says, I love that passage when it says about Jesus, He was full of truth and grace. And he modeled both of those so well. It wasn't like He was 50% of one and 50% of the other. He was all truth and He was all grace. And I think that's a great challenge for us as we look at our world, is how do we be Jesus, because He was both truth and He was grace. And we see in our world how the pendulum can kind of go one way or the other, where it can be all truth, and some Christians are really good at that, but there's no grace. And then there's other extreme where it's all grace, but there's no truth. There's no speaking truth. And Jesus said that truth shall set you free. And so how do we do that? And so I think as we look at our world and how fast our culture is changing around us, that to me is one of the great external challenges that we have, is how do we be Jesus to the people with truth and grace?
I think one of the things that maybe people don't think about when they think of sort of this is that the changing of the world in a lot of ways has brought so many people, I think, outside of even a natural setting. And I think of one of the things that, I mean, obviously you want to be able to have the opportunity to talk about grace and truth with everybody, but just even getting people outside sometimes is like a door into that, because they don't spend any time outside, it seems like.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of the things that we would say we do about truth and grace, I mean, you can see that in a lot of other settings. Churches always are seeking to do that, truth and grace, evangelical churches. But I think one of the huge advantages that we love and appreciate about all four of these places is the opportunity to be in the middle of God's creation, to be able to be on the lakes. And each one of these 4 settings that God has put these places in are so unique. We have a place like Oak Forest. It's in the middle of a state forest and just beautiful woods. And then we have Lake, Cedar Bay and the shores of Lake Huron. It's like just stunningly spectacular natural beauty. And so the ability that we have to speak truth to people while they are in the middle of God's creation is one of the huge values that I see for all 4 of our ministries. Yeah.
So thinking about some of those places, there have to be for you some special memories, some special places, some special moments. You probably had the most of them here.
Yeah.
But, as you've gotten to know Oak Forest over, what has it been, 12, 15 years?
That it's been fully functioning, but we've had it long because it took us a number of years to get that really operating well. Yeah. But yeah.
So thinking of what are some of your favorite things, some of your favorite places about these locations?
My goodness. There's something about I think of the water and the trails, being in nature at all these places. The beauty of the trail. I've loved the trail here at Forest Springs around the lakes, and sitting in the Adirondack chairs up at Cedar Bay, and just enjoying the beauty of the water or the sunrises at all of our places, or sitting to watching the woods at Oak Forest. And Dan Hartke over at Wood Lake knows where my favorite spot is. It's on that bench right at the waterfront, overlooking the beauty of the lake and sitting there when the sun is coming up. And so every one of these places has special memories. Obviously, this place, because I've been here for 40 years, has the deepest and the strongest. It's where I met my wife. It's where my kids have been raised. And so it'll be hard to compete with this place for that. But all 3 of these places, the more time I spend at each one of them. But I think it's the natural beauty. It's the sunrises, the sunsets, the woods, the water is special. But man, it's just what makes camp special, though, too, is the staff at all these places. And each one has a very committed staff that loves the Lord and loves ministry. And I love that part of the DNA of who we are as a ministry is missionary staff. And I think there's something that happens when you bring in people that raise their own support and are committed to the mission of the organization by raising their own financial support. It just adds to the longevity. That's what adds to, we had Dick and Vivian Angela here for 55 years, and Dell and Nancy Croker for, I think it was like 52 years, and Points and Borkarts and Crokers and Eversons. Like, that is what makes, I think, camp special for, not just for us and why it's fun to go to these places, but it's what makes special for the guests that come, because they look for these staff. They look for people. And it's not just about coming and enjoying the beautiful trails, but it's like the relationships is what makes camp so special. Yeah.
So how do you think that, most of the people that you named there, they
and I probably missed some. I shouldn't start naming anybody.
There's lots of staff who have crossed over some of those long-term thresholds, and so they've now retired. So several of the names that you list are no longer here on staff. They're still around.
Right.
How do we as a staff sort of pick that up?
Yeah.
That legacy.
Boy, that is a great question. That's a great challenge for me as I think about my role as director, because we talk a lot about culture, and one of the questions that we get asked is as we think about the people that have carried the torch for that culture for so many years, when they step out, how do we maintain all those positive values? I think we have to recognize that camp, there is going to be change. We have to accept that when we lose some of our long-standing staff and we bring in new, younger staff, we gain a lot because of the excitement and the energy and the enthusiasm of a younger staff. But we do have to be so aware. What are the things that we don't want to lose in that change? And that's a challenge. One of the things that I have thought a lot about and talked about with our board and with our staff is this idea that as I think about my changing role, there's 4 things that I really want to be able to speak into all 4 of these ministries and whatever else God has down the road. Sure. No announcement on that, but just if God was to allow for that or lead that way, the 4 things that I feel very strongly about that I want to have a part in all 4 of these ministries is vision, helping us to set where are we going as a ministry, which gets into some of the things like fundraising and casting a vision. It also, the second thing would be metrics. How do we know what's important? How do we establish and protect our definition of success as a ministry? A third one would be structure or how we are organized, and a fourth would be culture, or what makes Forest Springs. And so I would say there's joys in all 4 of those things that I love to be involved in. But as we've gotten large, I forget how many now staff we, aside from our summer staff, I think it's like something like 100, 120 plus people that are part of this ministry. So as God has allowed us to expand, those 4 things get harder. It gets challenging because now I'm a little bit envious of what Dick Angelo had when he was director, and we would sit as a staff meeting and we would have 15 to 20 of us in a circle, sure, and we would just decide. And now we can't even do that, at 4 sites. And so there's definitely a challenge with being able to do all 4 of those things well. Yeah. But I enjoy the challenge, and I think what makes it more feasible is that we have such a great staff team that has really bought into that and that are very supportive of helping us figure things out.
So, okay, the 4 things: vision, culture, metrics, structure. I didn't say them in the same order that you did, but
yeah.
So, which of those is for you the easiest one, and which one is maybe the most difficult for you?
I think that the one that in some ways there's challenges with all of them. In some ways, the one that maybe seems the easiest because it's one that we can very quickly agree on as a staff is metrics. We can easily agree. Like, we're kind of settling on this idea that our purpose is to see lives transformed by the power of Jesus Christ. In some cases, maybe we would say add through the outdoor setting, through creation. Yeah. But because everybody agrees with that, that's what we do. Sure. That makes it easy. I think for us to also say as part of that metrics is commitment to the absolute truth of the Word of God, and we have a statement of faith that all of our staff sign. So in some ways, it's easy. That's a little bit easier one, but it's also more challenging because of the onslaught of what we see happening, this coming tsunami within our culture. So I think the one that's maybe the hardest and one that we feel more of a challenge with would be, as we've gotten so big with 4 different sites, is maybe the culture one. Because how do we do that when we are 4 different locations? Again, that was easier when we were just one spot, and we could just sit around in a circle and we'd say, we don't like that, let's do this. Sure. But now, as director, I don't have the chance to do that with all of our staff. So the closest we come is when we're working towards this like One Forest conference idea in the fall, which I love that idea of bringing all of our staff and board members together, and we can speak into that. But I think culture is a little bit more of a challenge. Structure is maybe a challenge because we are so blessed with great staff, like I said, but we also, I think, what did we say? We have maybe 12 family units that are joining our missionary staff team right now. So
wow.
That's incredible that we have that many people that say, I want to be part of this. But I also know that we have some key holes,
sure.
Within our marketing team. We need, a couple of key maintenance people or food service people. And so hopefully over the coming months, we can continue to fill out that structure a little bit as well. Sure. But I think vision is another one that's maybe a little bit, not that that's easy, but our staff is they because they own this ministry and they love this ministry, we have a very voracious appetite for vision and say, okay, we could do this, we could do this. And so our staff really feed into that. Our challenge now is, because we've gotten such a voracious appetite of how we could see what God could do at this site and at Cedar Bay and at Wood Lake and Oak Forest, we're going to continue to need people that support that financially so that we can do everything that we are dreaming about doing. Sure. Like right now, we're talking here about an outdoor ministry center. It's like, man, that's a big task, but it's really complements our vision for how we can reach more people. Yeah. Okay,
so I'm going to ask you to put on your sort of prophet hat or your fortune teller hat and look into the future. So we're celebrating 66 years of ministry here this summer at Forest Springs, and you've been around for 40 of the 66. That's
crazy.
Almost 2/3 of it. Yeah. So it's 2058. Right, we're celebrating 100 years. What are we celebrating at that 100-year thing? What are some of the things that you as the leader hope that you can look back on if you're around? I don't know if you'll be. Hopefully, we'll all be there. But what are we looking back on in 2058?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jake. Boy, my mind goes in so many different directions. Some of the first things that came to mind was, right now God has blessed us with 4 sites. 2 of them, I would say, I've often seen these 4 sites as like we have a mature adult, we have a teenager, and then we have a toddler and an infant. And the mature adult, Forest Springs, is really functioning well. We have waiting lists and we're capacity. We're saying if we add something, we got to get rid of something. Oak Forest is basically on the verge of an adult, but they're full year round basically. And so, pretty much capacity. The other 2, we're still developing, and they're still growing. And I think looking down the road, the 100th-year anniversary, I would love to see that all 4 of these sites are just flourishing the way that we have seen this site flourish and Oak Forest flourish. So I would love to be able to say, we would look at our staff and say, all of them are just walking examples of being like Christ, that they are just living out their faith and personal growth. So I would love to see that. I would love to see us continue. We have such a great, I'll say, fan base or stakeholder base. People that love.
They're invested.
Yeah, they really are.
In every way,
in so many different ways. They love coming to this place. They love giving to this place, and they send their kids to youth camps. They send their kids, they come to camp themselves, and so they give the dollars. And so we have so many people. I would love to see that continue to grow as the ministries grow. We are, as I mentioned earlier, we are not looking to add more sites. It's not like we've said we would like to have, by the time we get to the 100th anniversary, we want to have 10 sites. That's not our goal. However, at the same time, if God brings something to us and someone presents an opportunity, we want to be faithful and say, so down the road, could God have more sites? We would never say never, but at the same time, we don't want to do that. We would rather do the 4 sites that God has well and at capacity. I'm thinking that right now, I didn't look at the exact numbers, but I'm thinking that right now we're maybe serving, maybe 20,000 between the different sites that we have right now. I would love to see us, because the two youngest sites, Cedar Bay and Wood Lake, have much more potential for growth, and we're still in the early stages with them. I would love to be able to celebrate 30,000 people that we are serving at these places through all the 4 sites. But I think maybe the biggest thing, Jake, and I alluded to this earlier, I would love to be celebrating at that anniversary that we have done the truth and grace thing well. That we have really, because I think that's going to be, we're going to be swimming upstream when it comes to speaking truth in today's culture.
Culture.
Yeah. And so I think for us to be very committed, saying this is still truth, but at the same time, loving people, and one of the things that I was just sharing with the staff too was this idea of knowing truth, but leading with grace. Because I think sometimes if we lead with truth, we maybe scare people off, So I think we know truth, but we lead with grace, and we love people, and as we build that relationship with them, we depend on truth. But so to me, that's what I would love to be able to celebrate. We've done that well.
So one of the things that as we think about like after 100 years, one of the potential impacts is that there's been this fairly strong sort of international component, right?
Yeah.
It brought you here.
Exactly. I was thinking about that earlier. It's like, if it wasn't for that, I probably wouldn't even be here.
Yeah. So as you think about kind of the impact that we're able to have beyond just the things that happened here at our location, maybe talk a little bit about what it means for us to be thinking beyond just our grounds and facilities here. How can we do that well?
Yeah. That is such an important part of who we have been. And I thank Dick Angelo for helping us to make that a strong component of our past, and in creating the LTD program as a means to serve people from other countries. I was looking at the potential of our incoming LTD class, and I saw that we have Israel, Mexico, Uganda, wasn't it Uganda? Mm-hmm. Japan, and Minnesota.
all of our neighbors.
But to me, that's just incredible. And I think it gives me goosebumps to think that the impact that we are having on people around the world, because these people are going to go back to their countries, going back to Israel. That's just amazing to me. And Japan, and multiplying. To me, it's just, Matthew 20:20, where it talks about, go into the end of the world. We're able to do that through the power of Christian camping. And so to me, that is a huge part of who we are. I had one staff tell me that he loves that we have expanded this ministry, and then we're not just about this one site. We're very inward looking. He said, he told me that he didn't think he would still be here if it wasn't for the fact that we were looking outside of our own borders, and knowing how much that is not just other sites, but the opportunity that we have to impact people, around the world through bringing these people here. It's just staggering. What is it? We have 200 plus graduates in the LTD program.
Yeah, something like that. Over 40 whatever years it is now.
Dick started in 1970s.
Were you the first? One of the first couple classes?
No, I was. I came maybe 6-7 years after it started, so I was still on the front end of it.
Sure.
They were still cutting their teeth on it.
Yeah,
Made
trying
a
to
lot
figure
of
out
mistakes.
what we're doing here.
Right. Yeah, it's still pretty early on, but I just think that is such a critical part of the mission of Forest Springs, that we're not just looking inward, but we're saying, how do we? Again, the fields are white under harvest. What are we doing to, impact the world for And Christian camping is such a powerful tool to do that. Yeah.
The challenges of kind of the culture that we're in, the culture that they're going back to in some cases, it doesn't seem like it's getting any easier. It doesn't seem like it's getting easier in some ways to convince people to come and try this even. I mean, we have our committed investor, people who love this ministry and will come. We just tell them the dates and they show up. So thank you for coming. But you think there are definitely some challenges. I mean, we've had staffing challenges trying to find summer staff and thinking about some of the openings that we've had. But when you think about kind of the big picture, you've been around Christian camping for a while, and you've seen ebbs and flows, and you've seen challenges come and go. What do you think of as some of the biggest challenges that we're facing as in the Christian camping world in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think that we are going to be continue to be faced with a challenge of how do we get people excited and committed to presenting truth in a world where truth is very relative. I really think that a challenge for us is going to be as truth becomes very relative and more accepted, that we're going to be more in the hot seat of how can we hold to a truth position when everything is so relative. I think I am very grateful when we tell that to our families in summertime and people, that they applaud us for that they say, we love that you guys are committed to the Word of God and the truth of the Word of God. But I will say, too, that every once in a while, between me or John, we get a little bit of a pushback from somebody that says, I didn't like this or I didn't like that. And so we're starting to feel a little bit of that turn. I think that's going to be a great challenge. And so for us, the opportunity to find people that love that mission, that love that heart, and to continue to expand. And that's why I love these opportunities to be doing things like this, because it opens the opportunities for people to say, man, I want that. I want to be partners with that. So continuing to find people that want to serve with that mission, and like I said, 12 families right now that want to be part of that. To me, that's thrilling, that want to join that team, and finding donors that want to be part of that and say, I want to support that because I see where this is all going if we don't support ministries like that. So I'm sure there's other things I can think of, but that's the first thing that comes to my mind. Yeah.
So, as you think through, with the context of those challenges in the back of your mind, and then, the day-to-day, the things that you've been walking through as the ministry has grown, what do you feel like you've learned personally? What do you think has been the biggest thing that God has been teaching you recently?
Oh, man. Beyond all the things that I've already shared, without repeating any of those things, because there's a lot of the stuff that I was sharing are things like, man, those have been some great lessons for me as I have led. I think the humility to trust God when I don't see, what He's doing. I think that to me has been such a rich lesson, because I often think of that story about where Jesus was with Lazarus, or with Mary and Martha, and they were saying, come, our brother is dying. That was one of his best friends. And yet he didn't go right away. He waited several days.
Right.
And it's like, Jesus, do you know what you're doing? This is one of your best friends, and you don't go right away. And so I look at that story and say, Jesus knew what He was doing all along, even though I think He should have done something different.
Yeah, so did Mary and Martha.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I look at that and say, okay, I see there that your plan was better than Mary and Martha's plan. And so for me to be able to step back, and I was just reading again, Romans 8:28, and saying, okay, all things work together for good. And so God, I'm going to trust you, even though I think this is what Wood Lake needs. This is what I think Cedar Bay needs. This is what I think Forest Springs or Oak Forest needs. I'm going to commit it to you, and I'm going to do my part to be as wise of a steward as I can with this. But at the end of the day, I'm going to trust you. And so I think to me that's been a big lesson, trusting God for what I can't see. But it's still doing my part to try and work towards that as best I can. Yeah. Yeah. That to me has been a big lesson. The truth and grace thing, that's been a huge thing. How to do both of those things well. So, yeah.
And I know you're a big reader.
Yeah.
You always got a big stack of books. Sometimes I know the book stack thing is dangerous. I've got a toddler at home, and my book stack is sometimes at her height and the nightstand there. And so I'm curious as to what's in your stack. What have you been reading these days?
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I think Karen knows that when we go on vacation, my thought is, how many books can I read? I think this last one I was able to read like 4.
And how long were you gone?
About 4 days.
Okay.
And so some of the ones that I read, I enjoy a wide variety, but one of them was a book about John Wooden.
The basketball coach,
UCLA basketball coach, and the name of the book was The Greatest Coach Ever. And one of the things, just fascinating to read about his example as a leader. And for him, the most important thing wasn't about winning, even though he was one of the winningest coaches. He won 10 championships in 12 years. So for him, it was more important. The most important thing about the guys and how he was developing the guys. And as I think about servant leadership as something that we stress and we talk a lot about here, man, he did that so well. He was so affirming, and everybody loved him because of he was building into their lives character, not just trying to make winners, win championships. And so that was one. Another one that I read on this last break was by Erwin Lutzer, We Will Not Be Silenced. And it's basically talking about the role that we have in the church to make sure, the church, big C, overall as body believers, to make sure that in light of all this cultural tsunami that's coming, that we're still able to share what we believe is truth, because the world needs to hear truth. And so what is the role of the church with that? I read another interesting one called A New Kind of Diversity, which sounds interesting, but it's basically talking about something we kind of alluded to earlier, the the diversity within our ministries. And it talks about how there has to be a working common value system between the old and the young. And he's talking, in this book, he's saying there has to be respect for the white hairs, but there also has to be a respect for the young staff and the energy and the excitement that they bring in. So he's basically presenting the generational thing needs to be a cohesive effort to work together. And so that was a very fascinating read. The last one I'll just quick mention, and it kind of fits with some of the other things we're talking about, is read a little more recently, was Mission Drift. And it's the whole idea that as a ministry, we have to stay true to what we really believe God has called us to do. We have to stay true to that mission and not be dissuaded or let culture kind of shift our focus. And so if people say, why would camp even step into more? I would say we were doing good, when we just had Forest Springs, and Oak Forest was given to us. And so that was a great addition. It serves adults in the western part of the state. So why would we step into more why would we accept a gift of Cedar Bay, and why would we step into Wood Lake? And for me, a big part of it was that idea that the fields are white under harvest, and if we have an opportunity to impact thousands of more people, and God is leading us to do it, we feel confident in that. Let's stay true to that mission of that that purpose and not drift from that mission and the truth of the Word of God. So, yeah, I think those are the key ideas.
Just some light vacation reading.
Yes. So, I think there's probably another one in there too. But
and what's the next one on the top of the list? On the top of the
actually,
stack?
There's a few. One of the other ones that I'm reading right now is Voice of the Martyrs. It's stories of women behind in the underground church, and it's just staggering to read the stories of people that we in Western culture, we have no idea. We think that we have a hard time if we can't get a good hot cup of coffee or cold cup of water.
Yeah.
And what some of these Christians in places like Indonesia or in Africa or some of these countries, we have no idea. And I think that is a motivator too, to say, man, is there more that we can be doing to impact, Christians, support the kingdom work. And so that's why I love what we're doing with these sites. But that's kind of a fast read too, because it's just stories, but it's kind of unnerving a little bit.
Eye-opening.
Yeah, eye-opening to read these stories and some of the persecution and it's
well,
kind of scary.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time to share some of these things with us, and appreciate your willingness to continue to lead and to do so in truth and in grace.
Yes.
And thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Jake.
Yeah, thanks for being here. See you out there. All right.